come upon this article on NPR News the other day that has really given me a lot of hope and optimism, especially at this time in the country where we're how many days away from an election? I'm not sure, not very many. And there's so much political divisiveness and polarization. And this article really shows us many things that we already know, but what's going on in other parts of this country by people that, I just learned about this particular group that you'll hear about in a moment. So the author of this article, Maria Fabrizio, opens this by saying that 1 in 4 people in the United States say they've ended a friendship due to political disagreements. 1 in 4. And many voters now say they have no friends where they live who are in the same political view as they are. So they're feeling very alone. And then studies in this topic of polarization. And in this article, polarization means specifically that there's no middle ground. One has to choose sides. The political opponent is turned into an enemy. Polarization also requires consensus on both sides. So there's little or no space for diversity. The author writes, "It's easy to blame and judge people who don't share your opinions. But," she says, "have you ever taken a moment to reflect how your own thoughts, words, and actions may add to the vitriol? Turns out, one of the best places to start when it comes to healing the political divide is to look inward." Well, of course, as Dharma practitioners or spiritual practitioners, we know this. And we should also know that we're able to influence other people to a certain degree. But change and transformation can only be done right here. Blame, judging, and criticizing others is the crafty work of the self-centered thought and ignorance. The teachings of the Buddha help us confront our own wrong views, our biases, and the crazy thinking that we're so capable of engaging in. Now, having thought about this, of course, this is a very big piece of work to do to transform my mind and heart. And, most of the time I think that's good enough. That's enough work. That's a lifetime work. It's lifetime work in future lives until I'm a Buddha. And what I have shied away from, I see now, is I don't want to ruffle the waters if I suspect that someone has an opposing view to mine or they do. And at this time, actually, this is not helpful. So I'm missing an opportunity to grow my understanding and engage with others who have views that are different from mine. So if I'm really sincerely interested in healing the division and the polarization, then I see that it's really important for me, it's essential to want to connect in ways with other people that are skillful. So I was very interested to read in this article that on the weekend of December 9th, 2016, a small group of citizens, half of them were Donald Trump voters, the other half were Hillary Clinton voters. They gathered together in South Lebanon, Ohio, for an experiment. And the experiment was this: could we talk with each other rather than at each other? What a bold thing to do on completely different sides of the story. So this meeting launched a group called Braver Angels. It was established in New York. It's a 501c3 nonprofit group dedicated to political depolarization. So this organization now has gone across the country. They run workshops, debates, and other events where red and blue participants come together to attempt to understand one another's positions and discover shared values. Can you believe it? I'm just amazed. So then I was very curious, why did they choose the name Braver Angels? So I had to do some looking. I thought, well, anyway, I won't tell you what I thought. It is not a religious group. It's not a religious organization at all. And you'll be amazed where their source for this name comes from. So I've got something on my laptop right now. It's only part of the quote. We must not break our bonds of affection. Does anyone know who said these words? Venerable Chuni, you get the biggest prize today. Venerable Chuni just said it. This is Abraham Lincoln. So they got their inspiration from Abraham Lincoln's call to courage and charity as they were approaching the American Civil War. And they chose braver angels because they said, we're asking Americans to do today something that requires huge bravery. We need civility. We need to treat each other with respect, and that's not enough. The forces against us today are very powerful, they say, and if we fail, our democracy fails. So it's time to stand up, be strong, even when it's hard to do. So the history of this phrase goes back to 1862, when the Civil War was getting, the prospect of civil war was getting more and more scary and imminent, and Lincoln warned this with these words. This occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. Today, we need to rise with the occasion. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have been strained now, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic chords of memory will swell when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. Lincoln is talking about our Buddha nature. I'm sure he didn't know the phrase. He didn't know what we share in common with all living beings. We want them to be happy. We want them not to suffer. And this is what he said in 1862. And this inspired this group, so that's why they grabbed the name Braver Angels. And so as they are defining their mission, they make it clear that this group, in these conversations, they're not trying to get people to agree with each other. That's impossible. And that's downright rude and insulting and arrogant, in my opinion. So they just want to turn down the temperature. They want people to stop hating each other. And through dialogue to see past labels and stereotypes and division. Because all of those things criticize the other and put people down, and that just adds to the problem. They want people to come together and have a dialogue where people can see each other and hear each other. So this is going to be much longer than I planned, so I'm going to start cutting things here right away. They do have this program where they identify 7 steps to start building our ability to have conversations in this difficult time with people on the other side, whatever that is. And so I'm going to talk about 3 of the steps right now. They're going to make us think of the Dharma. They're going to make us think of NVC, nonviolent communication. They're going to make us think of many things that we know, but here's how to do it in a political divide situation. So the first step is to notice stereotypes in our own thinking. Guess what? A few years ago, we did this test where we could look at our own biases. I was shocked. You know, as good practitioners, we think, oh, I'm not biased. Well, take a look. Do an online test. It's very revealing. It's humbling. So that's where we start. Take a look at our own biases and stereotypes. And so some questions we can ask ourselves. For example, there's many questions, but one of the questions is, how often do I focus on the most extreme or outrageous ideas and people on the other side? That's a very good question to ask. And then when we get really afflicted, do we judge people as worthless or deplorable, not seeing their full humanity? And then here's another one. It's one of my favorite things that Venerable teaches us all to do. You know, recognize that other people have life experiences that are radically different from my own. Everyone grew up in a family where there were things going on in a country, in school. They were bullied, they weren't bullied, they were the bully. They studied this, they studied that. All of this frames how we encounter each other moment by moment. let's keep that in mind. And then the next one is develop relationships with people on the other side. Relationships undermine stereotypes. So the phrase that they use here is get to know people, get to know folks. And this is how we actually bring about social change. Now there's 4 points on how to talk through the differences according to the braver angels. So the first step is nothing radical, but something so critical to any conversation is listen. Just listen. Don't talk, just listen. And then ask questions with curiosity. For example, like, well, what's behind that? Or why did you do that? Where are you coming from? So skillfully ask questions to probe with interest, with curiosity. And then the next step is to acknowledge what the other person has said. So we repeat back to them, just check to see that I'm understanding what you're saying. Here's what I think you said. I'm on the right track. Help me if I've missed something. So acknowledging that we're really understanding and listening to what their message is. And then the next point is, and they call it the pivot point. So first of all, you ask, here's one I don't usually do. You ask if you can share a different perspective. What a good idea. So she says it's like turning the signal on of a car. You're giving people a heads up, you've got a different point of view. And then they're prepared to listen to you instead of being reactive or responding. And it's a very respectful way to treat someone too. May I offer my perspective? They might not be ready. And then the last point is to offer our perspective using non-polarizing language and to check in with them to make sure that they've heard what you've said. So those are very skillful steps. They're reminding us of things we've learned in the past in the Dharma and these other things I've mentioned like NVTC. But how critical it is right now for us to want to reach out. So I think that's something that I don't know how we're going to do. I don't know how I'm going to do this living in a monastery. I guess I could hang around in the post office longer when I go there tomorrow. That might go quite well, actually. The post office is a very lovely meeting place. So the seventh step is cultivating empathy and compassion. Now, I was astounded to read this. So in a polarizing situation, there's another contributor in this article that I didn't mention, but her name is Tanya Israel, and she's a professor of psychology at a university in California. Anyway, it goes on to mention her saying that she started listening to a cassette tape recording of a loving kindness meditation by Sharon Salzberg a number of years ago. And now when she engages with people to do these kind of discussions, she prepares herself by doing a loving kindness meditation first. So if you want to refresh your exposure to that kind of teaching, volume 5, if you don't have it yet, in the Library of Wisdom and Compassion, in Praise of Great Compassion, His Holiness and Venerable Children go into great depth about how to develop loving kindness, how to do that meditation, and of course the steps to cultivate bodhicitta. So just learning about this group, Braver Hearts, and that there's people who are doing this. You know, we don't have to join the group because we might not find one in our community. And you might not be living near a monastery right now to have this kind of conversation, but you can take a look at these steps. They offer this program online. And then at Thanksgiving and at Christmas, when you get together with your family, you can have a harmonious meal with them by maybe being the lead on how to do this kind of conversation. I'd like to finish with another quote from Abraham Lincoln. And he said these words at the second inaugural address, March 4th, 1865, at the end of the war. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, let us bind up the nation's wounds. So let's be a part of this right now. Let's vote, and let's really keep our mind directed towards being of benefit to others and doing what we can do, each of us individually, to heal the political divide and the polarization.